What's going on, team? Proof here, and welcome to another Duel Masters Plays video. And before I hop into it, I hope you guys like the new layout that I kind of put together. I think it's nice for when I'm streaming to make things nice and presentable. And I wanted to try it for recording a video to just see how it comes out. So if you guys like it, let me know how it is. If there's any type of information you want to see on the layout, let me know. But for this video, I'm gonna be talking about engines for deck building in Duel Masters, and the way it's gonna work, I'm gonna just talk about what an engine is in my view. Talk about some of the engines that I put together as a sample base, and talk about what the cards do, and kind of talk about how the engine can fit into some of the decks you might be building. So, what is an engine? To me, an engine is like a set of like 6 to 16 to 18 cards that are cohesive within each other that help you have a basis for that particular part of your strategy. So a core, by contrast, is like a solid set of like 25 to 30 cards that form the basis of what your deck is trying to do. And then you kind of use the last bit of the deck space for tech options or any particular type of thing you want to do to help particular matchups. An engine is kind of like is like a part of a core, but it's not the core in and of itself. Like you can use the engine, maybe like a draw engine in terms of playing a control deck, for example, that you want to have that be the center of how you want to draw cards in your deck, and then have the rest of the space to commit to more control-less tools and what have you. So I have 10 different engines here. I try to make 2 per civilization and try to make them vary and different and of varying sizes. And I kind of want to talk about what they do and how they play into strategy and how you can fit them into your deck building. So let's go hop into the first one. And for these, they're all within the same color because they're all self-contained within the same civilization, so you won't see any mixtures here. My hope for this is that it helps somebody with their deck building, and then you can maybe take some of these sample engine ideas and apply it to your deck building, maybe tweak it up for how you see fit, or combine some of the engines together to be able to see how it functions within your deck. This here is a very simple sample draw engine. You have 4 Aqua Hocus. Aqua Hocus here is a 3-mana 2000 that when you play it, you draw a card. So a nice +1, it gets a body on the board for you, and it replaces itself in your hand to be able to function. The reason why you want to use this is because it's just very easy and simple, and it has some strong evolution creatures that you can turn it into if you want to add that to your deck building. And then we have 4 Pekaton. Pekaton is a 4-mana 3000 Cyberlord that says when you play it, draw a card. The reason for that is that there's no 2 cards at the moment that are like Aqua Hocus, a 3-mana draw you a card that puts a body on the board instantly. Pekaton here kind of gives you 1 extra cost for 1 extra 1000 power, which is really nice because 3000 power quickly is very nice body to have in terms of being aggressive, and just has a nice sturdy body around because it's more difficult to remove 3000 than it is to remove 2000 because a lot of common cards are 3000 or 2000 power or under. And then we have 3 Illusionary Merfolk. Illusionary Merfolk says if you control a Cyberlord, when you play him, draw 3 cards. So the progression here that you go turn 4 or sooner if you accelerate Pekaton into next turn Illusionary Merfolk to draw you 3 cards. And this is really good against control decks because a lot of control decks right now like to try to discard your hand and reduce your resources. But if you can land Pekaton into Merfolk, you just replenish your hand that outpaces most of the common discard options at the moment, which makes it really good. And if you combine it with Hocus, Pekaton, Merfolk, you just add a whole bunch of cards to your hand that your opponent is going to have to try to discard before you just run them over. And then, as pretty much core with every water engine, is 4 Aqua Surfer. Aqua Surfer is a shield trigger, which means that when your opponent breaks your shield, if it pops up, you can play it for free. And that's really nice for tempo because Aqua Surfer here says when you play him, return 1 of your opponent's creatures back to their hand regardless of power or cost or what have you. So It is arguably the most impactful card in the game at the moment because of how scary it is to trigger it early if your opponent's being aggressive. And it's useful from your hand later because it just removes a threat out the way temporarily, which might give you enough time and enough breathing room to be able to win soon thereafter. This engine pairs really well with, it could be used in an aggressive engine because it allows you to draw cards and outpace opponent's discard. It can also be used in more mid-range strategies that kind of want to have some board presence with a later game focus because it allows you to just have that board presence to make your opponent not want to attack or be mindful that if they attack, they're going to lose the creature after that, while having the tools in place to outlast control and if you have a little later game focused deck. This engine here is just your basic Liquid People engine with the idea that you're going to turn into Crystal Lancer later. The changes here, you see, instead of using the Merfolk piece of it, you took some of those out and included 4 Aqua Guard, which is just a basic 1 mana 2000 blocker. Blockers defend you. Most blockers can't attack. This piece of information here says it can't attack at all. Light blockers and some other blockers are able to attack creatures, which means that they can attack tap down creatures, but they can't attack players, which comprises your shields and the player itself. So just play Aqua Guard here, nice easy tempo play to get it out, and then supplement that with 4 Crystal Lancer, which evolves on Liquid People. Evolution works that if you have the evolution piece on the board, you can play this from hand on top of it and it evolves into the card in question. And evolution creatures don't have summoning sickness like all other creatures do, so it can attack immediately. Why this is important is because Crystal Lancer here is a double breaker, so it breaks 2 shields and it can't be blocked at all, regardless of how big the blocker might be on the opposing side of the board. So being able to have cheap Liquid People, which is what Aqua Guard, Aqua Hocus, Aqua Surfer are. Well, not cheap, but can be cheap if you play it for free. Being able to have those turn into Crystal Lancer later is really impactful because your opponent can't stop it for that turn at least. This engine here goes really well with nature because you can accelerate into Crystal Lancer to outpace what your opponent can remove your Liquid People. It also goes well in mono water, which is a common thing you might see something like this in, because it allows you to play like a nice build game. Like you have some more draw options. You might incorporate the draw package that I talked about previously into this with the Pecatons and the Merfolks to be able to go Hocus, Pecaton, Merfolk, Crystal Lancer. There's a nice 4-turn progression there, and it allows you to just be able to beat your opponent down with Lancer. You might incorporate some other cards on top of that to make it get to 40 cards. You might get some balance in there as well. But it's a nice mid-rangey option because you put a lot of pressure or a lot of onus on getting to Lancer to beat your opponent down, which means you want to have some sustainability on board with your Liquid People to survive to then get to Lancer, which means you might not be playing as fast and loose as your opponent might be anticipating or what you're going against. So this probably want to put some other means of removal in there, some more blockers to slow your opponent down to build up to your Lancer. So this is an aggressive fire engine. Fire engine, not to be confused with a fire truck. The basis behind it is that this leans to be more aggressive to try to beat your opponent down before they can stabilize and be able to win with their later game stuff. So to do that, you need to be able to A, get around blockers, and B, have some early drops that are difficult to remove by traditional means. So the first card we have here is Comet Missile. Comet Missile says, on top of being a shield trigger, it's a 1 mana destroy a blocker with the power of 6,000 power or less. Why that's amazing is that all common blockers that are played at the current moment are 6,000 power or less. The only blocker that is more commonly played that is above 6,000 power is in light, and it costs 5 mana, which means that if you're quick enough, you can put your opponent in a position to where if they do happen to play that particular blocker, you can overwhelm your opponent's board already to be able to win by pretty much disregarding it. Or you can have other means of getting around it by having additional maybe bounce mechanics with water, because water specializes in bouncing. If you didn't know that already, so you can maybe incorporate that, or you just overwhelm them by having just a wider board than their blockers can handle. And then we have 4 Snip Striker Bull Razor. 2 mana for 3,000 power is incredibly fast for the stage of the game that we're in, and it's hard enough to remove 3,000 power off of the board without early blockers, which means you can get them out the way with Comet Missile, which is why the synergy is there. The restriction on Snip is that if your opponent has more creatures than you, you can't attack with him, which is important to keep in mind. If they have the same number of creatures as you, he can still attack, which means if you put yourself in a position where you're behind on board, you can try to reduce your opponent's creatures by attacking into them if they've attacked, or if you tap them down somehow, and enable Snip to be able to attack. So keep that in mind if you're playing a deck around him. Just try to have a lot of creatures in there to be able to make the board wider, and try to take advantage of that 7 board limit. And then last but not least in this particular engine is Kuk Palan. And Kuk Palan is a little 2 mana 1,000 power creature. Doesn't seem too good, but when you take into account his ability, which says he can't be attacked, which is very important for an aggressive card, meaning that your opponent has to waste a removal resource on Kuk Palan, which they either don't want to do or they don't have the ability to, depending on what kind of deck that they play, which means that you have to use fire removal, darkness removal, or nature removal, or you have to bounce it back to hand and try to delay it from having like a wide sweep of firebirds beating you down. This engine here really goes well in fire. Like water light is a really common core that goes along with this, because you can be aggressive with Snip early, and then you combine it with the draw engine to help sustain against control decks if they can remove your stuff early, and then you kind of use some light stuff to be able to help sustain against other aggressive decks as well. And by contrast, there's a more controlling engine here, which features Bomedius and then some other controlling cards in the fire department. The fire department. Pun not intended. I'm telling you, I'm trying not to do that. But first of all, we have Rumblegate. Rumblegate is a 4 mana spell, which says all your creatures get plus 1,000 power until the end of turn, and they can attack untapped creatures. So normally, to be able to attack a creature, they have to be tapped down. But Rumblegate bypasses that by being able to make all your creatures attack untapped creatures, which means it gives you need to have a board that has enough power to overwhelm your opponent if they can attack untapped, which means this pairs really well with light, because they have a lot of big blockers there, and being able to use that to your advantage to have the bigger light blockers that can attack creatures but can't attack players, be able to just beat down your opponent. And it allows, if you're playing against a light mirror, to be able to have your creatures get 1,000 power on their creatures, because they might have the same creatures as you, to be able to remove them before they can be more impactful on the board. So next up we have Burst Shot, and Burst Shot is a shield trigger which says destroy all creatures with 2,000 power or less, which is important for aggressive decks because a lot of them, outside of Snip as I talked about, do fit that criteria. So being able to hit it for free while your opponent is being aggressive towards you allows you to be able to help sustain a little bit longer. And the Bomedius, which is really core to a lot of control decks, this just kind of helps, helps solidify your game plan if your plan is to prolong the game and try to reduce your opponent's resources. Because Bomedius here is a double breaker, and it says when it breaks a shield, it destroys them instead of going to your opponent's hand. So when you break shields traditionally, they go to your hand and they become a potential resource for your opponent. Bomedius here says, forget all that, I'm gonna put them straight to the graveyard, which means they don't go to your hand for a resource and you don't trigger shield triggers on top of that. So a lot of control game plans revolve around reducing your opponent's resources, trying to field a Bomedius successfully, and be able to beat them down with Bomedius, destroying their shields and reducing that resource even more. So this pairs really well with light cards or light focus deck. It pairs really well with darkness because darkness is the strongest removal options, and it has discard to go along with it. So you'll see a lot of common decks that use something like this with darkness to be able to reduce your opponent's resources, stick the Bomedius down, and just run home to victory from there. This here is the very basic darkness package that goes along with control, or it could be probably used in a more mid-rangey option just to help give some minor control elements to your deck, just to help slow your opponent down if you're trying to build up to a later game idea. So you have 4 Ghost Touch, which 2 mana, shield trigger, and your opponent discards a card at random. Very simple, strongly impactful if you hit the right card at the right time. More often than not, you kind of just feels like it's going to hit the one card you want to keep in your hand in that situation. A lot of times I'm ready to play like a big draw spell to recoup, and then they drop a timely Ghost Touch and it hits the one that's in my hand that I want to use the very next turn, which makes it pretty annoying. Then we have 4 Locomotiver, which is 4 mana 1000 shield trigger creature, and when you put them into play, your opponent discards a card at random. So a body, Ghost Touch with a body basically, just to give you some more board presence and just to help you give you some consistency to your discard. And then we have 4 Terror Pit. Terror Pit, 6 mana shield trigger, and just destroy one of your opponent's creatures. Doesn't matter, disregards power, disregards civilization. There's really no restriction on it unless the particular card can't be chosen, which we don't have any of those yet at the moment. Pairs really well with Bomedius engine that I talked about, and it pairs really well in like fire water darkness cores. Control decks try to build up to Bomedius. Goes really well in like anything really, because it's a 12 card small package to go along with it. So definitely keep that in mind if you want to incorporate some darkness, like some minor control elements, while trying to build around the rest of your strategy. They have a little more of a creature-based darkness package. We have 4 Propeller Mutant. Propeller Mutant says when he's destroyed, your opponent discards a card at random. So this kind of bugs your opponent because you could be aggressive with Propeller Mutant, and it makes your opponent maybe not want to trade into it because it might hit that one card they want to keep in hand for later. Granted, if you're being aggressive with it, your opponent has more cards in hand, but you're also pushing, if you're pushing a more aggressive mindset, it can still probably get that one card you want to get while making your opponent wager if they want to remove Propeller Mutant or not. Then we have 4 Death Mori. Death Mori is a demon command, 4 mana 4000. It says when you play him, you can destroy one of your own creatures. If you do, your opponent chooses one of their creatures and destroys it as well. So this pairs with Propeller Mutant because you can force your opponent to discard a card while getting rid of one of their creatures on board. So it's a nice little 2-for-1 trade in your favor, which is, you like those in pretty much any card game. But you stick a 4000 power creature on board, remove one of your opponent's creatures, and then remove a card from their hand with Propeller Mutant. Then we have Mongrel Man. He says when another creature is destroyed, draw a card. Or when another creature goes to the graveyard, draw a card. Which pairs well with Death Mori, because Death Mori destroys 2 creatures, so you draw 2 cards. You pair that with Propeller Mutant, you draw 2 cards, your opponent discards a card and then loses a creature. So it has nice little synergies throughout to go along with it. And then of course the 4 Terror Pit to go along with it, because destroy a creature, draw a card, which is a nice 2-for-1 in your favor. Something like this pairs really well probably with water, because you can have extra ways to draw cards to keep your resources going, to not put everything on Mongrel Man. It probably can also go well with a little more mid-range, you made with some fire destruction, because fire has a lot of destruction tools in it. They just are more power based, like you saw with Burst Shot, and being able to use that to your advantage as well. You maybe want to use this in a deck with Balam. Balam is a big demon command evolution that destroys all non-darkness creatures, and Death Mori being a demon command gives you a nice evolution bait to go with it. So something to keep that in mind. And then for light, we have a small little tiny package here of 3 Cologne, which is a shield trigger creature. When you play it, you tap one of your opponent's creatures. And then 3 Holy shield trigger. When you cast it, tap down all your opponent's creatures. So the reason I call this Ag Splash, this goes along with the this is a common splash you might see in aggressive leaning decks, because you might have be aggressive, but you don't want to die to your opponent's aggression. So you increase your odds of surviving your opponent's aggression if you have ways to tap down their attackers before they can hit you, which is where Cologne and Holy Ah come into play. Pair that with Aqua Surfer, because a lot of common aggressive decks play water for the draw engine. You have 10 ways of being able to stop an opponent's attack before they can hit you, which lends itself to being able to help survive your opponent's aggression before they can win. So that's why this is a more aggressive leaning light package you can include in your decks. And then the other way to go about it is that you can go more angels and more mid-range draw. So we have 4 Picari. It's a 4 mana 4000 angel command, which says it's also a blocker, but it says when you play it, draw a card. So it instantly replaces itself, gives you a blocker, and it's a sturdy blocker, which the best ways to remove it are Comet Missile or Tornado Flame, which is increased in popularity because of Picari here. Tornado Flame really wasn't a card that you saw back in the day, which Tornado Flame is a 5 mana fire spell that just says destroy a creature with 4000 power or less, which fits nicely here with Picari, which very interesting to see the impact this card has had, and it's one of the highly played cards in the game at the moment. Then we have 4 Misrius. Misrius says when another creature comes into the battle zone, draw a card. It doesn't matter if it's yours or your opponent's. The restriction here is that if you have 6 cards in hand, you can't draw, but that really doesn't hinder it as much, and actually kind of helps it because you're not drawn to oblivion and lend yourself to decking yourself out. And really strong draw engine. You see these more often in decks that don't have water, because this Misreese here replaces the water draw, and so that way you don't have too much conflict there. We have 2 Alcadius. Alcadius is a 6 mana Angel Command evolution, double breaker, and while it is on board, both players can't play non-light spells. So it shuts down Terror Pits, fire like destruction cards, which means the only thing that your opponent can play is Holy Ah, which is the most common light spell. So incredibly powerful card to have, and since you have such a able and sturdy body evolution bait in Picari, you have good chances of being able to evolve your Alcadius on your Picari. And then a couple Holy Ah, just to be able to have some ways to be able to tap down your opponent's board if Alcadius is on board, and you might have a chance to be able to shield trigger it as well. You commonly will see this in a deck that uses some nature, because being able to go early acceleration into Picari or Misrius before your opponent is at the mana to be able to remove those effectively is a powerful tool to have. Like if you land Misrius while your opponent is at like 4 mana, they have very limited options to be able to remove it. So you might be able to snowball Misrius into getting a big board, which means that you might get Alcadius on board before your opponent can handle it, and things like that. Kind of massive snowball. It's more of a mid-rangey option, but it can play in control decks as well, because you can use it to replace the water draw and just focus in on the fire darkness sides, which are common pairs for control with this, to be able to focus more on those and just be able to discard your opponent's hand while you have Misrius on board. You can turn your Locomotivers into discard a card, draw a card, things like that. So nice little tight package to have. So the first one I have is the Nature Mana Ramp package. This, you can tailor this to more of your liking. Like if you want to cut down on Poisonous Mushrooms here, which Poisonous Mushroom says when you play it, choose a card in your hand and put it into the mana zone. So you go from 2 mana to 3 mana instantly to be able to be ready for a turn 4 play soon after that, while your opponent might be at 2 mana, for example. But you could probably reduce these down if you are afraid of discard or you don't want to have 4 of these in your deck, because after turn 2 they do become a lot less useful. Then we have 4 Fairy Life. Fairy Life is a shield trigger, which says put the top card of your deck into your mana zone. So unlike Mushroom, it doesn't cost you an additional card out of your hand, but you don't get the creature to go along with it, which might matter to you more depending on what kind of deck you're trying to build. And then we have 4 Bronze Arm Tribe, which is exactly like Fairy Life, but it's a 3 mana 1000 power Beast Folk, which Beast Folk is a very common evolution base to have in your deck, or very common evolution like creature base, because a lot of the evolutions might be of the beast folk race. Going along with that, Bronze Arm Tribe is a very staple card to see along with beast folk evolution cards. And just be able to go from 3 mana to 5 instantly, or 3 to 4, and then make a 5 mana play. Something common you see is turn 3 Bronze Arm Tribe into next turn Miss Rias, to be able to be on the board like I talked about before your opponent can handle it. This pairs well with fire and or nature. I'm sorry, fire and or water, because you can go turn 2 mana acceleration, and then turn 3 into, say, Peccaton into turn 4 Merfolk, or you can go turn 3 Bronze Arm Tribe into Peccaton, Merfolk into, or Liquid People into Crystal Lancer sooner. So just being able to accelerate into a Crystal Lancer is a big advantage to have, especially if you're playing against mono water. Just being able to have your bigger things come down a turn sooner and having 12 ways to accelerate that measure is really strong to have. Last but not least, just a very simple Beast Folk package. We have 4 Torcon, which is a shield trigger creature, Beast Folk. If your opponent plays it, you can, or if your opponent triggers it, you can immediately go into the next card here, which is Bark Whip. Bark Whip is a 2 mana evolution for Beast Folk, and he says while he is tapped, all your other Beast Folks on the board get plus 2000 power, which is very nice when your Torcon can hit over, say, an Aqua Guard to be able to keep the aggression going. And this leans more aggressive than otherwise. And then 4 Burning Mane, a simple 2 mana 2000 power becomes 4000 if Bark Whip is tapped. And then the Bronze Arm Tribe again. And you can play other evolutions. There's a big one in Fighter Duel Fang, which is a 6 mana 8000 power Beast Folk evolution, which accelerates your mana by 2 when you play it. You can also put this into, say, a fire deck, maybe using the fire package with the Snip and the Kooks, or you might be able to use this with the light package, the aggressive package, to have a little tap down measure in there, or you might be able to use it with the water package to be able to draw, to be able to go Bronze Arm into Aqua Hocus, maybe put that together with some of the Liquid People evolutions. So you kind of see how the packages and the engines can come together into maybe start to form a core for a deck, and then see how the deck comes together from there when you incorporate the text and what have you. So that'll do it for the respective engines. Those are the ones that I came up with, just to kind of give you some sample ones to build off of. Let me know if this video is helpful at all. Let me know if there's some other engines that I probably didn't mention in this video that you want to include to help somebody out in the future. But yeah, I'm really enjoying playing Duel Masters again. If you guys haven't been checking out the stream, definitely come check it out. Shout out to all the people, as you might see underneath my webcam here, that have been following recently. Shout outs to all those people, and just really enjoyed playing it again. Like, I can't say it enough. But hope this video finds you maybe thinking of something that you want to use or incorporate, and just hope that it's helpful in and of itself. So that'll do it for me, and look out for the next one. Definitely come check out the streams. I'd love to have you in there. And until the next one, peace. Be easy.